Alright, so the first thing I do is disassemble the blaster, and with this one you get quite lucky because the grip comes in two parts, so you get your 2 parts for the grip plus 1 part for the body, which means you can get quite good colour separation, if you wanted to do different colours and different things, so that's quite nice. Once you've got that taken care of, stripped it all down, stored all the bits that you're not using in a box so that they don't go walking away. You'll notice the other one is still in one piece. What you do then is you just give it a quick rub down just to break the surface. I just use a bit of 400 grit just to break it up. I don't want to take too much detail off the various bits. There is on the the right hand side of the trigger, there is the series of the manufacturing markings which you can rub off quite easily with a bit of 400 grit, which I've done. It just makes me fishes it off. But as for the rest of the detail on the shell, I'll be detailing that. So as I say, just take it apart, rub it down, and then it's on to primer. So we'll do that stage next. Right, so because I spray outside, I like to put my pieces on a bit of cardboard so that if the weather does change, I can literally just lift the cardboard up and take it inside out of the way. The primer I use is just bog standard pound shop or dollar store primer. Most of the base colours that I'll be using in spray paint come from the pound shop, and what I like to do is give it a very light coat to start with, leave it for 20 minutes and then come back and give it a second coat just to make sure that I haven't missed anywhere. The beauty of doing a primer coat is, especially over bright colours like the green, is that you can see if you've missed anywhere. So some of these grooves and details get missed ever so slightly. So I'll be coming back and doing a second coat on the primer, and then we'll start on the base coat. Alright, so the bits have now had a second coat of primer. We're now moving on to the base coat, and in this case it's just black and silver, again purchased from the pound shop. You'll notice there's a couple of bits missing. That's because I am not spraying those anymore. They will be hand painted later, and this is just a base coat just to give me the colour, and then I'll be dry brushing and detailing, etc, etc. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. Obviously if you're painting indoors, make sure you use the correct equipment, breathing masks and things like that. But outdoors it's not too bad, you can still get a respirator mask for relatively cheap if you wanted one. So yeah, we'll do this and then we'll have a look-see. Okay, so it's the same again, a light coat with the colour, let it dry off a little bit and then put a second coat on. The one thing I forgot to mention is with the splodge, I'm using a pink plastic coat paint, which I was experimenting with some pinks for another project. I found that was quite well. Doesn't work too well with this primer, but at the end of the day it's supposed to look like a splodge, so a couple of layers of that should do the job. So yeah, we'll let that dry, put a second coat on it, and then we're on detailing. Okay, so while the pieces outside are still drying, we can come indoors and work on the grip. Now it has a wood texture already embossed into it, and I like to emphasise that on these particular guns. And I use, again from the pound shop, a cheap pot of brown wall paint. It is just bog standard emulsion, but when you come to cover it with a lacquer or a clear coat, it does become really, really nice. So we'll do that now. You can see how it goes, and then when I come to clear coat it, you can see the difference in it. Again from the pound shop. You'll notice again I've put it on a bit of cardboard because that way I can just move it out of the way so that it's not going to get knocked over while the paint is still wet. So we'll do that now. Okay, so the paintwork has now hardened enough for me to start detail work. Again, I want to try and make it match the shotgun, so we're going to use that for visual clues and cues as to what we do in terms of weathering and overall colour and things. So we are starting with the black base coat. We're going to add some silver detailing. We're going to add some silver detailing and do a lot of dry brushing, and weathering. But we'll get the detailing done first. As you can see with the grips, it's gone a very, very light brown compared to the darker glossy brown. which is what happens when you put the clear coat over the top of it, so that will come out very nice. I've not painted these bits because I will be doing these bits silver as well, and that'll all be brush painting. For the brush paints, I'm just using bog standard Tamiya acrylic model paint. It's very versatile. I also have other acrylic paints, from the pound shop, which I will use for other details and highlights and things of that nature. So we're going to crack on with that now and see how that turns out. Alright, so it might not be very crisp detail wise, but I've added the various highlights that I wanted to add to the shell, and now we're just going to go into a bit more weathering, so dry brushing and washes and things of that nature. It's easy. I find it easier to reassemble the parts of the shell so that you're working on half a shell at a time rather than doing one bit then moving on. Say, if you're working on the grip and you move on to the handle and you move on to that and none of it matches, if you just reassemble half the shell, then you can work on it as one piece when it comes to dry brushing and highlights and things of that nature and washes. Just makes your life a little easier. Also gives you the opportunity to check that the shell still fits together and you haven't used too thick a paint, because sometimes that can scratch off when you're reassembling if it's too thick. So it's worth looking at. So we're going to try that now. We're going to work on this half and then we'll see how it goes. I know you can't see it in this light because it is a bit gloomy this morning, but that is finished now. All that I need to do is clear coat it and reassemble it. So now we're going to do this to the other one. Alright, so just a quick note on reassembly. It's basically the reverse of when you take it apart. If you want to, you can take photos if you're not aware of how the blaster operates, or you can use this video as a reference if you wanted to. One thing worthy of note, let's just take the plunger out real quick. The two screws there and there holding the rotation mech in, and the screw in the trigger guard are all the same size. There's the three smallest ones. The rest of the screws in the shell are all the same length, so it's only those three that are different. As you can see, we've got the smallest one there, and that's the comparison. So those are the three small ones, the rest are all this size, and they'll just pop in together. One thing to remember is the spring for the rotation mech goes underneath that screw on the peg at the bottom. It is just screwed down, but it is an oval. It is a tension spring, so it has got the loop on the end to put over the post, so make sure that's seated correctly before you screw it down. And one final thing which I didn't do in the modification was a bit of plunger padding. Don't know if you can see it that well, but I have put a little bit of foam pad in the end. What I like to use, again, a pound shop special, but you can get packets of the furniture protectors, various different sizes. You get about 3 or 4 different sizes, plus some thicker foam ones, and you also get a sheet that you can cut to size should you wish. They're not very thick, so you do have to layer them up, but they are quite useful because it saves you having to cut anything or glue anything, because they're adhesive, and they seem to work quite well for padding plungers. It's what I tend to use if I can. The larger of the discs fit quite nicely in the inside of this plunger. So yeah, as I said, it's just the reverse of taking it apart, making sure that the spring is correctly seated inside the tube and that the tube is the right way up. One major thing to remember is to seat the cylinder properly when you are closing it, and if something won't go together, don't force it. Try and have a look, see what's catching. Something might not quite be right or tightened all the way down, you just don't know, or even sometimes the catch spring could slip. So as you're putting it together, just make sure it's sitting. It should close easily. It shouldn't be you have to force it or hit it or anything. It should close relatively easily. It might clip, and you might get a slight sort of snicking noise when you put them together if you're doing it right. But just take your time putting it together, because you don't want to ruin anything, and just make sure it functions once it's done. Right, now we move on to the other one and do the exact same paint scheme. When I did my Persuaders, which is another video which I'll link, I did the same colours, but I reversed it. Now with this particular blaster and this set of blasters, I want them to look very similar. So I mean, the only real difference will be the dry brushing, some of the finish, but the colour scheme itself will be identical. So yeah, it'll be a matching pair rather than a flip pair. So we'll be doing that. So let's go and sort that out, and then I'll show you the two once they're both all back together and done. Well, there we go. Finally got both of them done. Pink detail on the top. Left the orange bits orange, and you know, they've come out quite good. I'm happy with them. A couple of the detailing elements I did rush a little bit, so there is some over brushing and stuff like that, which, you know, yeah, you have to look really closely to find it. And the main thing, of course, is that it matches. Well, they complement the shotgun. That was the one thing that I wanted. So that's a proper loadout now. Got the shotgun as a backup, and then the two pistols. So yeah, there you go. Taking a couple of days waiting for the weather, but other than that, I'm very, very pleased with that. So that's that one taken care of. So yeah, as I say, we now have a matching set. It looks pretty cool. They do complement each other quite nicely. I was worried that there was going to be too much black on the pistols, but with the dry brushing and the various weathering, it actually comes out quite well, and they do complement the shotgun quite nicely. So yeah, we're going to leave it there, and hopefully see you next time. Cheers.